Live from London, this is BBC News. Less than 48 hours before the general election, Rishi Sunak defends his campaign, insisting he hasn't given up and can still win.
Today on BBC Verify, we're bringing you a roundup of some of the main claims from the political parties that we've scrutinised in this election campaign.
In other news, Hurricane Beryl strengthens to a Category 5 storm as it sweeps across the Caribbean. Fire crews on the Greek island of Kos are battling wildfires that forced locals and tourists to seek shelter for a second day. And police in Nairobi fired tear gas at protesters as more anti-government protests are staged in Kenya's capital. Hello and welcome to BBC News. It is the penultimate day of the general election campaign, with less than 48 hours to go until the polls open on Thursday. Party leaders are travelling across the country using the last stages of the campaign to push their key messages and try to win over undecided voters. Here's our political correspondent, Hannah Miller.
Campaigning at Hucknall Town Football Club, where Labour wants to win big. In this part of Nottinghamshire, the Conservatives took more than 60% of the vote last time around. Visiting here, a clear sign Keir Starmer has ambitious goals.
If you want change, you've got to vote for it. Thank you very much.
The Labour leader was asked about his hope of protecting family time on Friday evenings. The Conservatives claim it would make him a part-time PM.
And it is really desperate. My family is really important to me, as they will be to every single person watching this. And I just think it's increasing desperation, bordering on hysterical now.
The Conservatives' fortunes couldn't be looking more different. As Rishi Sunak stocked shelves in a supermarket in Oxfordshire, he was asked about this prediction from polling expert John Curtis.
He said this: there is more chance of lightning striking twice in the same place and a bit more than Rishi Sunak remaining as Prime Minister. Do you accept that?
That's his view. That's not going to stop me from working as hard as I can over these final few days to as talk to many people as possible about the choice. And I was up at 4 this morning talking to workers at a distribution facility. I'm here talking to you. I'll be out till the last moment of this campaign.
3, 2, 1.
Having cast himself as the master of the not-so-subtle metaphor, the Liberal Democrat leader Ed Davey visited Taunton, where he was asked why he continues with stunts like this.
Yes, we had some fun with the dominoes, but there's a serious point. If you want to get rid of the Conservatives, what could be a once-in-a-century election to change the political geography of our country? So we do put health and social care at the top. We do deal with the sewage scandal. We get our economy back on track.
Reform UK are also hoping to change the political landscape.
You cannot reward failure, and the Tories have broken Britain after 14 years of power, and the reality is that there has to be a complete realignment of the right of politics.
Hi everyone, hello.
In Alness in the Highlands, the SNP leader John Swinney was able to put a smile on some faces. The photo calls of this general election campaign are coming to an end, perhaps a relief for everyone involved. Hannah Miller, BBC News.
Well, let's go live to Westminster, live to our political correspondent Ian Watson. And Ian, the developments there on the campaign trail, but aside from that, we've had another defection from a Reform candidate. So bring us right up to speed on that particular line.
Yes, this is Georgie David, who's a candidate for Reform UK in an East London constituency, and she says she has resigned with immediate effect and is endorsing the Conservatives. She's the second Reform UK candidate to do so. There was another one in Derbyshire during the course of this campaign. Now, she says the reason for doing so is she doesn't want to be associated with racist, misogynistic and bigoted candidates. She says many of them are indeed people who would fall into that category, in her view, although she exonerates the Reform UK leadership. She says they're not racist, but really the reason for going is her frustration and dismay, as she puts it, with the party leadership for not really tackling the concerns that people like her have about some of their fellow Reform UK candidates. Now, interestingly enough, Reform UK, of course, haven't been entirely silent in this. Richard Tice, their chairman, is accusing the Conservatives of dirty tricks, of saying effectively they're offering inducements for people to defect, save seats, jobs. Rishi Sunak was asked about this as well earlier on the campaign trail, and he said it's Nigel Farage who's got questions to answer about his candidates, not him. And I guess, Matthew, it'll be a bit of a boost for Rishi Sunak, of course, because we saw there earlier in the programme, of course, just how Reform were eating into the Conservative vote, perhaps 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll tracker. So if you can get some people in Reform UK to say, no, we're endorsing the Conservatives after all, that may well be valuable come polling day. But it is only 2 candidates so far who've gone to the Conservatives, and I think it actually still means that Rishi Sunak has got to really have his work cut out to try to persuade people who might be minded to vote for Reform to either return to the Conservatives or to stick with the Conservatives. And already there's been some noises off from his own side about whether he should have gone, as he has done in recent days, harder and sooner in his criticisms of Nigel Farage.
Now, always when you get to this stage of the campaign, it's pretty frenetic and frantic as they crisscross the country with all the parties just trying to drive home what they have boiled down as the critical message.
That's right, the critical message. I think, I don't know how far people are tuning into it, but I think we'll probably be sick of hearing it, Matthew, but it is quite straightforward. Labour know that quite a few people have yet to make up their minds. Therefore, they're saying if you want change, you have to vote for it. They're trying to create this kind of spectre of people waking up on Friday morning and nothing will change and they'll have 5 more years of the Conservatives. So that message of change is one that they're emphasising over the next 48 hours, although Keir Starmer's still being pressed on defining what that change would look like. As for Rishi Sunak, of course, he's warning of the dangers, as he sees it, of a big Labour majority that makes them far less accountable in his view, but also his twin track is to warn people that taxes would rise under Labour. Difficult for him given the tax burden where it is now, but he's saying he'll cut taxes for every generation from young people to pensioners, and those are the key messages which they're hammering home. But for me, I think it's not so much the messages, it's where they're campaigning that perhaps gives us the best guide to what may or may not happen on Thursday. No votes yet being cast apart from those who've had their postal ballots. Nonetheless, just take a look at one county, Oxfordshire. Oxford East, traditionally Labour, much of the county Conservative, and yet Rishi Sunak was there today in the Witney constituency, which now the Liberal Democrats think is winnable for them, and he was also in Bicester, where in Banbury, where Keir Starmer visited yesterday. These are traditional Conservative seats in some cases which have been Conservative since the party was founded, and that's where the political battleground is at the moment, and I think that explains why he's going so strongly in this message of not giving Labour what he calls a supermajority, what the rest of us would call quite simply a large majority.
Ian Watson there at Westminster, thanks very much. Thank you. Straight to breaking news, and we are hearing from the courts in Manchester. The former nurse Lucy Letby has been found guilty of the attempted murder of a premature baby known as baby K in February 2016. The jury sent out at 11:30 today and returned with a unanimous verdict in the last few minutes. That's come from Judith Moritz, who's our correspondent there at Manchester. But let me just repeat that. That is important breaking news. It has just happened. The former nurse Lucy Letby has been found guilty of the attempted murder of a premature baby girl known as baby K back in February 2016. Let me give you some more of the background because, of course, you'll remember that Lucy Letby, this is a retrial because the jury had been sent out to consider its verdict because the 34-year-old was convicted, as you will know, last August of the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit between June 2015 and June 2016. However, a verdict on the allegation concerning this infant, known as Child K, could not be reached, and that's why we had this retrial ordered on that single count. Now, Letby is said to have targeted child K in the early hours of February the 17th, 2016, after the infant was moved from the delivery room to the neonatal unit shortly after her premature birth. The prosecution at Manchester Crown Court said that Letby deliberately interfered with child K's breathing tube through which she was being ventilated with air and oxygen. It is said that the consultant paediatrician, Dr. Ravi Jayaram, caught the nurse, quote, virtually red-handed as he entered the unit's intensive care room. He then went on to intervene and resuscitate child K. Letby told the jury of 6 women and 6 men she has no recollection of such event. She denied doing anything harmful to child K and added she did not commit any of the offences of which she has been convicted. But convicted she has been of this, the latest case regarding child K, that just coming in from Manchester Crown Court in the last little while. Well, I've given you some of the background. Let's get more from our correspondent who has covered this entire case, and that is Judith Moritz.
When detectives arrived at her door, the game was up for Lucy Letby. Britain's most prolific baby killer had finally been found out. In June 2015, she went on a year-long murder spree on the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Last year, she was convicted of killing 7 babies there and attempting to murder another 6. Now she's been found guilty of trying to kill another child, a premature girl who can only be referred to as Baby K. This consultant, Dr. Ravi Jayaram, virtually caught Letby red-handed. He could see that the baby was in trouble and the nurse was standing by her doing nothing to help.
This is the tube that is then passed through the baby's throat and down into the lungs.
This video was shown to the court to demonstrate how babies are given breathing support by ventilator.
Low pressure warning with no alert.
Lucy Letby had dislodged Baby K's throat tube and the monitor alarm was silenced. It's a technique that the prosecution expert at Letby's first trial, Dr. Dowie Evans, believes she used on further occasions too.
I reviewed a number of cases other than the one in this trial and found a number of cases where the breathing tube had been displaced, going back at least a year prior to the first fatality. So I think there was a pattern of breathing tubes being displaced when Lucy Letby was on call, going back 12 months, possibly more, before the first fatality.
You think that this was what she started doing as perhaps the easiest way of harming babies before moving on to other techniques?
So. I think that she could well have started off by displacing breathing tubes. I think she then moved on to injecting stomachs with lots of milk and air.
Cheshire Police say they're investigating Letby's entire time as a nurse. Further criminal charges could follow. So why did this particular trial happen now? At the end of Lucy Letby's original trial, the jurors were undecided on charges of attempted murder relating to 5 children. The prosecution could have decided to retry all of those charges, but in the event chose to put just one of them, that involving Baby K, before a new jury. Why have a retrial?
I don't know what was going through the minds of the prosecutors in this case, but in previous cases where somebody has been convicted of a homicide and been given a significant sentence, it would take a lot for me to then retry them for something else that wouldn't necessarily add to their sentence. However, children being harmed, losing their lives, in this case, I can understand why it was significant enough for them to say, we will pursue this case.
Letby is already serving 14 whole life terms, so this conviction won't increase her actual jail time. At her last trial, she refused to appear in the dock for her sentencing. It's not known whether she'll do the same thing this time around too. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
Well, that verdict just coming in. If you are just joining us, worth just repeating what has happened at Manchester Crown Court, because Lucy Letby has just been found guilty of the attempted murder of a premature baby girl known as Baby K, dating from an incident in February 2016. The Crown Prosecution Service have just released a statement. Let me read it to you because it comes from the senior Crown Prosecutor, Nicola Wynne-Williams, who says Lucy Letby has continually denied that she tried to kill this baby or any of the babies that she's been convicted of murdering or attempting to murder. The jury has heard all of the detailed evidence, including from her in her own defence, and formed its own view. Our case included direct evidence from a doctor who walked into the nursery to find a very premature baby desaturating, with Letby standing by, taking no action to help or raise the alarm. She had deliberately dislodged the breathing tube in an attempt to kill her. Staff at the unit had to think the unthinkable, that one of their own was deliberately harming and killing babies in their care. Letby dislodged the tube a further 2 times over the following few hours in an attempt to cover her tracks, and suggests that the first dislodgement was accidental. These were the actions of a cold-blooded, calculated killer. The grief that the family of Baby K have felt is unimaginable. Our thoughts remain with them and all those affected by this case at the time. And a reminder that a statement from the senior Crown Prosecutor, Nicola Wynne-Williams, their statement after that guilty verdict came in, that latest guilty verdict for Lucy Letby. Phil McCann is our reporter there at the scene, who was listening to that, was watching those events in the courtroom. Let's take this in stages. When that guilty verdict came just now, just describe what it was like in court.
Well, it was silent in court, Matthew, because that is what the judge ordered that it had to be, perhaps mindful of the emotion around this case. It was last year, wasn't it, that the country became acquainted with Lucy Letby because she, well, earned the title of being the most prolific child serial killer in modern British history, and of course one of the most notorious serial killers in British history. So that verdict being delivered, it was met with complete silence, and some members of the press had to be in a separate room to be able to watch it, and so weren't able to pick up on all of Lucy Letby's reaction. She was present in the dock this time. She wasn't present in the dock a year ago when some of the verdicts were delivered, because they were delivered in different stages, and of course, as was very well known, she also wasn't present when she was sentenced last year either. But she was in the dock today. She was throughout this trial has been, well, sat there and listening as only she can to the evidence that was being produced against her, and she did give evidence in this trial as well, in which she denied all of the allegations. But yes, silence in the courtroom as that one verdict was delivered today.
All of the details of the original case and this case are incredibly shocking. I was just reading out the statement from the CBS, and they draw people's attention to the fact that a doctor walked into this unit and caught her, the quote was, caught her virtually red-handed.
Yes, that doctor was a consultant paediatrician called Dr. Ravi Jayaram, who became a witness who was very well known. He was well known before he became a witness, because he's appeared on lots of TV shows, but he was a bit of a star witness, as you might say, for the prosecution at the last trial last year. Gave evidence in lots of the different counts that Lucy Letby faced. And as you mentioned, in this case, he said that he walked into the neonatal intensive care unit a couple of hours after Baby K, as we have to refer to her, was born. Now, that was the unit where Lucy Letby worked as a neonatal nurse. He said that he walked in there and came across Lucy Letby standing over the incubator that Baby K was in, quote, doing nothing. And at the time she was doing nothing, he said that Baby K's blood oxygen levels were dipping. Now, this whole incident, Lucy Letby said that she couldn't remember very much of it, but she denied that she was doing it. And just to be clear, that the whole allegation against Lucy Letby here was that she attempted to murder Baby K by tampering with her breathing tube. The prosecution throughout this trial and the previous trial have had to wrestle with the fact that these events happened a long time ago and there weren't witnesses for all of the events, and so you had this main witness here seeing her doing nothing. As for the dislodging of the breathing tube, Lucy Letby's explanation for it was that active babies, as in physically active babies, can often dislodge breathing tubes on their own. Ravi Jairam was asked about that, and he said that it wasn't impossible, but that it was very unlikely. These are tubes that go into the baby's mouths that are secured with tape and other methods of securing them. So he was saying it was very unlikely that that would have happened, and also unlikely that it would have happened on multiple occasions, because Lucy Letby was accused of trying to do this on multiple different occasions. So yes, an awful lot of this evidence hung around what Dr. Ravi Jairam said, and it's worth saying that the defence were extremely critical, not just of his evidence, but of him personally. In fact, in closing arguments, in the closing submissions that were made to the jury just a few days ago now, the defence labelled Dr. Ravi Jairam's evidence pathetic. That was what they thought of him, but the jury here clearly believed him, because it took just over 3.5 hours for them to convict Lucy Letby.
Yes, that was very quick. Phil, in terms of this count, it was a retrial on this one solitary count, but it is interesting the jury at this retrial was told about Letby's previous convictions for murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder another 6. The prosecution told them that her status as a multiple murderer and attempted murderer was an important piece of evidence that should be taken into account.
Yeah, now normally a jury in a case involving somebody who has previous convictions wouldn't be told about those previous convictions, or they might be told some element of them. It seemed that the judge's attitude at the very beginning of this case when I was here was that it was just unfeasible to try to believe that they'd be able to get jurors who wouldn't know about these previous convictions, because of course it was so well covered at the time, and Lucy Letby became so notorious, and so he was very keen to tell the jury that they may know about those allegations and they can take they may know about those convictions rather, and they can take them into account, but he said that they must decide on Lucy Letby's guilt or innocence in relation to these allegations based on what they heard in court, and they must also, as is normally the case with juries, judges will tell them not to do research. They were told that they weren't allowed to have a look at previous coverage of this trial, but they were, as I say, able to take it into account, and it in the end did take just, as I mentioned earlier, 3.5 hours for her to get that conviction. This is of course one conviction to add to that long list that Lucy Letby now has. It's worth remembering, of course, at the centre of all of this, one family to add to that list of Lucy Letby's victims.
Yes, I'll come back to that thought in a moment, but I want to ask you about sentencing, because she, of course, is already serving 14 whole life terms for those previous convictions. When will we get sentencing on this?
That will come on this Friday morning. That was the last issue that the judge dealt with in court. He told Lucy Letby that she should be there for that sentencing. As we saw last time round, she didn't attend sentencing, and there's been a lot of criticism, not just of her but of others who may seem like they have little to lose not turning up to their sentence. But it will be at 10:30 this Friday that she will receive that sentence. As you say, of course, she already has multiple life orders, and that was the first thing that the judge said to her when he dealt with the issue of sentencing. He said, of course, Lucy Letby, you are already serving multiple life orders. She will not be coming out of prison, but the sentencing for this count will happen on this Friday morning. There is another interesting something else now that's interesting that can happen, which is that Lucy Letby appealed against her convictions last year, and that appeal was decided on around about a month ago now, about 5 weeks ago, and the Court of Appeal announced that she had failed in her bids to appeal against her convictions, but didn't release the full reasoning, and that was because of this retrial. So it is now the case that we'll be able to find out more details of why the Court of Appeal didn't believe that Lucy Letby should be allowed to appeal against her convictions in full.
Phil, coming back to the family, child Kay was transferred to a specialist hospital later on February the 17th because of her extreme prematurity. She died there 3 days later, although the prosecution didn't allege that Letby actually caused her death. That is why the charge here was attempted murder. In terms of that family, have they been in court throughout the last few days listening to this evidence? Were they there to hear the guilty verdict?
Well, the court did hear submissions from the family earlier on, and those submissions were talking specifically about what happened at the specialist hospital that baby Kay was moved to. As you mentioned, it's been an important part of this case that Lucy Letby wasn't accused of causing the death of baby Kay. That's why, as you said, this charge was attempted murder. But we heard from the parents about the anguish of being there in that neonatal intensive care unit, not knowing, of course, what Lucy Letby had been doing 3 days beforehand, and being faced with the decision of whether they have to turn off the life support machine that their daughter was on. They had had long discussions with the consultants at the hospital that she had been moved to about whether she was likely to make any progress, and her mum, in the submissions that were made to the trial a couple of weeks ago, talked in those submissions about how she didn't want her baby, how her baby for her entire life had been poked and prodded, and she didn't want her to suffer anymore. And so she talked about how they then made that decision to turn off her life support, which she said was the most difficult decision I've ever made in my life. Now that gives you some insight into the anguish here, but of course it's worth making clear that that was before the family were informed about the suspicions against Lucy Letby. And this is something, a theme that really we saw in the last trial of Lucy Letby last year. We had families in that who had no idea that there was any suspicion around their children's deaths, or that there were even accusations that somebody attempted to kill them. So to add on to their anguish, they were then told about these suspicions, and then of course, because of the justice system and how long these things have taken, they've had to wait years and years to get answers for them. And for the families of baby Kay, of course, well, they didn't get answers at the trial last year because the jury failed to reach a verdict. Now they have that answer. It's just worth, I think, Matthew, just sparing a thought for the families of 5 other babies where the jury also failed to reach a verdict. There were 2 counts on which Lucy Letby was acquitted. There were 6 counts on which the jury failed to reach a verdict. This was a retrial on one of those counts. There aren't retrials being brought on the other counts. And we heard from a solicitor when the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, made that decision. We heard from a solicitor representing some of those families talking about just how disappointed they were that there weren't going to be retrials brought in those cases, and how they might potentially seek other avenues of redress, other legal avenues of redress. So this just one of those families who've finally got an answer today.
Yes, another very, very difficult day for all of the families. Phil McCann there at Manchester Crown Court, thank you for taking us through all of that. If you are just joining us, I'll just repeat that main headline that has come from the court in the last little while, because Lucy Letby, the former nurse, found guilty of the attempted murder of a premature baby girl known as baby Kay in February 2016. The jury had gone out at about 11:30 today, returned very quickly with a unanimous verdict at just after 3 o'clock. So Lucy Letby found guilty. She'll be sentenced on Friday. And I read out a statement from the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. We will return to the court and bring you any reaction that happens in the next little while from the CPS and others in the next little while. But that news just breaking here on BBC News. Let us pause now and catch up with a weather forecast. Here's Darren Bett.
Hello there. We've seen a lot of cloud heading our way again today. The winds are coming in from the Atlantic, somewhat stronger winds probably, I think, by Thursday. Those winds, though, will be bringing in some rain at times and keeping the temperatures quite low for this time of the year. Now, we have seen some sunshine. That was Eastbourne earlier on. And these are the average July maximum temperatures. This is what we should be getting, if you like, at this time of the year. But this is what we're going to find this afternoon. So those temperatures are something like 4 to 6 degrees lower than normal for this time of the year. So there's a cooler feel. All our weather's coming in from the Atlantic, and whilst we've seen a lot of cloud today, there's more cloud to come in from the Atlantic, which will bring some wetter weather as we head into the night. Still 1 or 2 showers around during the afternoon into the evening, but the wetter weather comes into Northern Ireland and Scotland, moves over the Irish Sea into northern parts of England. We may even get a bit of rain heading towards the southeast as well. So a lot of cloud around tonight. Before the rain arrives in eastern Scotland, temperatures here could just get a little bit lower. Most of the rain, I think, will be in the morning. That will then move away, but it stays quite grey and misty over the hills and coasts in Wales and the southwest. A little bit of rain comes back in, and then particularly in Scotland and Northern Ireland, it'll be followed by some sunshine and some showers, and then the winds start to pick up a bit as well. So these are the temperatures, and again, very disappointing for this time of the year, 15 to 19 degrees. Now that weather front will be out of the way and it takes the rain away, but you've got low pressure to the north of the UK, quite a few isobars on the chart as well, some stronger winds as we head into Thursday, particularly for northern areas, and this is where we'll see some frequent and heavy showers, and in Scotland there's a risk of some thunderstorms as well. The further south you are, the better chance you have of staying dry, and there may well be more sunshine around, welcome sunshine, that will just lift those temperatures to perhaps as high as 20 degrees, but still not the 23 that we'd expect in the southeast of England. Some more weather fronts, though, do come in on Friday that could bring some rain to England and Wales, and further north we're looking at quite a number of showers, particularly in Northern Ireland. Very unsettled through the rest of the week, and it stays quite showery probably into Saturday and Sunday, and still on the cool side.
Ready for a lively debate? Sometimes our panellists agree, and sometimes they don't. There's people with a lot to say, and others who just say enough. Some who want to ask the hard questions, some who want to avoid them, and some who think they have the answers. They're guaranteed to keep you entertained, whether you agree or not. Politics Live with Joe Coburn. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
One thing I can say which is true of this region is that it's become harder to be a journalist. It's really important to be on the ground. If that means you've got to go to hostile, remote places, then we have to do that.
That's the opium resin. There's a very pungent smell of it in the air right now.
The Delta wave of COVID devastated India, and I think it was the coverage that we did for the BBC at the time which brought international attention.
What's happening here could affect the world's ability to recover from the pandemic.
We've met with families who've had to do the unthinkable.
Another person came up and asked if we'd like to buy their child. The desperation is hard to put in words.
Many of the stories we've had to tell are distressing, they're difficult, but that's usually an indicator that they're really important stories to tell.
Welcome to BBC News. If you've just joined us, it's just gone 3:30. Let's look at our main headlines here. The former nurse Lucy Letby has been found guilty of the attempted murder of a baby in 2016 following a retrial. Less than 48 hours before the general election, and Rishi Sunak defends his campaign, insisting he hasn't given up and can still win. And Frank Cotterill-Boyce is announced as the latest Children's Laureate. Well, let's return to that breaking news that we were just looking at in the last little while. The former nurse Lucy Letby has been found guilty of the attempted murder of a premature baby known as baby K in February 2016. The jury was sent out at 11:30 this morning, returned its unanimous verdict just after 3 o'clock. Well, let me show you the live pictures, because in the next little while we're going to get a news conference both from the CPS and from the police, and you can see the activity outside of the courthouse because that verdict coming in, The jury, as I was saying, only out for a couple of hours. They had heard the evidence. They heard Lucy Letby deny the charges, but they came back with that guilty verdict very quickly. So we expect reaction and a news conference as soon as that starts. We'll return to Manchester and bring you the very latest. Well, let's return, as we wait for that, to the general election, because throughout this campaign, our colleagues at BBC Verify have been examining the various claims being made by the political parties, some of which have been potentially misleading. Let's get more on all of that. Here's Ben Chu.
The past 6 weeks have seen a lot of claims from political parties, and we've been examining most of them on Verify, letting you know whether you can trust the figures cited and providing the context you need to really make sense of them. So as we come to the end of this campaign, let's recap on some of the most prominent and potentially misleading claims. First of all, the Conservatives have pushed this one perhaps most heavily, that a future Labour government would put up households' taxes by £2,094. In that first debate with Keir Starmer, Rishi Sunak used the claim 10 times. Why does it risk misleading people? Several reasons, but let's highlight two. First, because it's based on some questionable assumptions from Conservative political advisers about how much Labour's policies would cost. Second, because it's a figure based on 4 years of supposed resulting tax increases, not one. That's really not how such figures should be presented. Labour has also used some rather dubious numbers of its own about the impact of the Conservatives' plans. Rachel Reeves and others have been claiming that the Conservatives' plans would push up people's mortgages by £4,800. Why does this one risk misleading people? Again, for various reasons. But for one, it assumes that the Conservatives would make none of their proposed £12 billion per year savings from the welfare bill and would have to borrow that sum, which seems unrealistic. Second, they're playing a similar accounting game as the Tories, adding up 5 years of supposed higher annual mortgage bills for households resulting from higher interest rates. And the Liberal Democrats, well, they've risked misleading people in a different way in this campaign. This is from their campaign literature in one constituency. It shows the Lib Dem vote share in 2010 and Labour's share in 2017. So 2 cherry-picked years. Moreover, there's something missing. No bar representing the vote share of the Conservatives, who have actually held this seat in question since it was created in 2010. The Office for Statistics Regulation says polling or election results data should be visualised in a way that does not mislead the average reader about the relative support for different parties. Campaign literature like this, as well as leaflets produced by some other parties in parts of the country, do not pass that test. Let's also look at a prominent claim from the SNP too, that the Labour Party would shut down the North Sea oil and gas industry, which would risk 100,000 jobs. This has been made by the party's Westminster leader Stephen Flynn in various debates. That is roughly the number of jobs that Scotland's oil and gas industry supports in the wider UK economy. Yet it's pretty misleading to suggest Labour's plans alone put all of these jobs at risk. Labour has said it would not issue new oil and gas licences, but it has also pledged not to overturn existing licences. There's been lots of other claims, of course, such as Reform UK on the international law around small boats, the Green Party on the implications of its tax plans, and Plaid Cymru on what Wales is owed from HS2 funding. Verify has scrutinised them all, and you can find further details on the BBC website.
Ben Chu at BBC Verify. Now, even some of the best-known members of the Conservative Party are being forced to fight for their seats in this election. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, who's been an MP since 2005, admits a Tory win in his constituency isn't a sure thing, describing the competition as being on a knife edge. Well, he's been speaking to Joe Pike.
Hi team, great to see you. On the street and under pressure, Jeremy Hunt has held on to his Surrey seat for almost 20 years. But now he knows it may be slipping from his grasp.
What I can do is a really good campaign. I've got a brilliant team of volunteers.
You've seen the polls, you know what opposition parties are saying about your chances. What does that feel like, Mr. Hunt?
Do you know what it really feels like, Joe? It feels like it's as it should be in a democracy. And I say to my kids, you know, Daddy may not be Chancellor, he may not be an MP after the election, and we should be proud to be in a country where people like me are the servant of the people I talk to on the doorsteps.
But in the same Surrey village, the Liberal Democrat challenger is increasingly confident.
Good afternoon, sir. My name's Paul Follows. I'm the Lib Dem candidate in the general election.
Would you be a better MP than Jeremy Hunt?
I'd certainly be an MP that cares about what's going on.
So you're not sure you'd actually be better at the job?
I would be better at the job because, honestly, I'm going to be more present. I am now as a local council leader. I have been through things that he won't have ever experienced. I mean, this is
about Chancellor, Health Secretary, Foreign Secretary. You think you're more qualified?
So what is the good of being the Chancellor of the Exchequer when you have no idea how people are struggling with the cost of living? When you say comments that £100,000 isn't a very big salary in the area that you're talking about?
The new constituency of Godalming and Ash is largely affluent and within commuting distance of London. Experts argue these are the places where tactical voting is possible, but the Labour candidate doesn't seem to think he will benefit.
It's a tough fight. There's a lot of tactical voting going on, so the Lib Dems are putting up a very good fight, the Tories are putting up a good fight, we're putting up a good fight.
But you can't win, can you?
You can try. I'm always up for the fight. Never say
you don't sound that confident.
It's a tough fight, you know.
There is a new entrant in this political contest, the impact of which is so far unclear.
Surely reform will just be splitting the Conservative vote?
Absolutely not. Joe, we're the only centre-right ticket on the ballot paper in Godalming and Ash.
But presumably it's Conservative voters you're trying to persuade to move to vote for you?
Of course it is.
So you are splitting the vote then?
No, absolutely not. We won't be splitting the vote. We will be bringing the vote completely across to reform. That's my hope and that's my aspiration.
Whatever happens here, a lot of cabinet ministers could lose this week. For the Conservatives, that wouldn't just mean a loss of experience, but a loss of potential leadership contenders too. Joe Pike, BBC News, Surrey.
Well, let me just point you to the full slate of candidates in that constituency, and there is much more detail. So if you head to the BBC website, more details on that particular constituency. Let's get back out on the campaign trail. Let's speak to our political correspondent, Jess Parker. She's with the Labour campaign trail. Jess, welcome here to the programme. Just take us through the key campaign messages from Labour with just 48 hours to go.
Yes, I mean, we're hearing Sir Keir Starmer addressing a number of crowds so far today. So first of all, he kicked off the day at a football ground. He likes to visit football grounds with Labour Party supporters. And one of the key messages they keep trying to land is that he says, if you want change, you've got to vote for it. Now, of course, this is, I think, an effort by the Labour leader to get out the vote ahead of polling day. With all these warnings from the Conservative Party, they say that Labour could be heading for a super majority, and they're telling voters not to sleepwalk into that. I think Sir Keir Starmer is trying to counter that by trying to urge people who might be thinking about voting Labour to go out and do so. So I think both trying to work against any potential complacency that might come from different reasons from people who might be considering supporting them. Then he headed to a drinks distribution warehouse. We were surrounded by millions of cans of booze in this factory site where he addressed workers and took questions on a lot of different issues, illegal immigration, the hospitality industry, because that was relevant to the business. One of the quite interesting kind of political questions that he was asked was, why shouldn't people fear a Labour super majority? He was asked that by one of the workers at the factory there. And Sir Keir Starmer said that the polls don't predict the future, but he repeated a line we sort of heard overnight in an interview he gave to, I think it was the Times newspaper. He said that Labour needed a strong mandate, and the mandate is important to us. And this kind of language we're seeing, both from the Conservatives and from Labour, is really interesting at this point of the campaign. It does, I think, even though there is some dismissal of the polls, reflect the fact that Labour has held on to that significant poll lead throughout the 6-week campaign. And with a couple of days to go until polling day, look, of course, Sir Keir Starmer, Labour figures, they're going around saying they're not complacent and that they're going to fight for every vote, but speaking privately, more off the record, to Labour officials and actually activists as well at these events that we go to, because it is often Labour supporters who are there to cheer on Sir Keir Starmer. There is a mood of optimism and excitement around the Labour campaign, given that poll lead that they have sustained, I think, throughout.
Just a quick one on that line that some cabinet ministers have been going on, or former cabinet ministers, talking about work-life balance, some accusing Keir Starmer of potentially being a part-time Prime Minister. He's been pretty dismissive of all of that, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's come up quite a lot today. So this was some comments he made about how he tries to and has tried to and will continue to try to carve out time for his kids and his wife on Friday evening. So he tries not to do work things from 6 p.m. onwards from Friday evening. And then some Conservative attacks came, calling him potentially, if he were to become the next Prime Minister, a part-time Prime Minister. And he has dismissed these today as borderline hysterical. He also, they mentioned in a little press huddle, because it came up again, so it's an off-camera huddle that they do with press reporters, newspaper reporters, they get to ask questions. He also mentioned how his wife's family, his dad, her dad is Jewish, and that Friday night they sometimes sit down for occasionally prayers. So Friday evenings, sometimes with Jewish families, they'll have dinner, they'll have prayers. So he talked about that as well, relevant to his wife's family and faith. But overall, he has been dismissing these attacks as something that he thinks is actually essentially rather desperate, he says, from the Conservative Party. And that, of course, he says sometimes he does have to work on Friday evenings, but he thinks it's actually a good thing. I slightly paraphrase, but it's a good thing that he does try and carve out some time for his family. So that has been a persistent question through the day that he has tried to take on. And overall, I think what he's trying to suggest is that this is all a sign of desperation from the Conservatives, that there have been attacks picking up from those comments that he made. I think it was earlier this week.
Jessica Parker there with Labour, thanks very much. Let's get back to the issues, because throughout the campaign, BBC News has been travelling right around the country to try to look at the issues that matter most to you, the voters. Well, today we're in the northeastern constituency of Newton Aycliffe and Spennymoor, a newly redrawn seat. So let's cross to my colleague Regini Vaidyanathan, who's there for us. Regini, back to you.
Well, Matthew, this used to be part of the constituency of Sedgefield, and if that sounds familiar, it's because it was the seat that Tony Blair held for years on end, including, of course, when he was running the country. This is Blair's backyard, but what is so significant about Sedgefield is that in 2019 it flipped to the Conservative Party under Boris Johnson. Now, it is a seat that Labour is hoping it can take back in a couple of days' time, and people I've spoken to so far, a lot of them don't want to come on camera, I should stress, say that they are undecided. I'd say 50% or more of the people I've spoken to here and in the nearby Darlington constituency, which is another swing seat, if you can call it that, haven't made up their minds for certain. Well, I'm joined by two locals here and voters as well. Let's start with you, Stuart. So, Stuart, you in many ways are the human embodiment of this constituency, because you used to be lifelong Labour, then you switched in 2019, didn't you? What are you going to do on Thursday?
I don't know. I think I have no trust in the Conservatives at all, so it won't be them. I'm not particularly happy about Sir Keir Starmer leading a socialist party. I think the default setting in this case has to be the Greens, but I may just go and destroy me paper. That's my prerogative.
And you used to be a staunch supporter of Tony Blair back in the day. Why did you switch from Labour to the Conservatives last time, first of all?
Along with thousands of other people right the way throughout the country, we were tricked. We were tricked into voting for the Conservatives. We believed that the Conservatives under Boris Johnson, which by and large he was the person that we were voting for. It wasn't the Conservative Party, it was Boris Johnson. It became a presidential style shootout, if you like. And Johnson had the common touch. He got in touch with the ordinary people in the street. Hence, the red wall just crumbled all over.
And what is it about Sir Keir Starmer that you don't like? Why won't you give Labour another chance like you did for years under Mr Blair?
Well, I don't know. I don't trust the man. I don't trust him to carry out the things that he says he's going to do. Politicians are all the same. They're only in it for themselves. They don't care about the likes of Bill and me.
And what about Mr Sunak? Because you voted for the Conservatives last time, but you're also saying you don't want him.
Well, I didn't vote for Sunak last time.
You voted for Johnson, so it's very squarely about the personality.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do you think, very quickly before we move on to Bill, what do you think you're going to do when your hand hovers over that ballot paper in 2 days' time?
It'll either be destroyed or I'll vote for the Greens.
Okay, interesting. Right, let's move over to Bill. Now, Matthew, I should say that Bill watched our broadcast in the last hour. He doesn't live too far from here, so he got in the car because he said he wanted to have something to say to us. So here he is. So, Bill, you saw we had another Stuart on in the last hour who said he was going to vote Labour this time.
Yes.
And you're a lifelong Conservative voter, is that correct?
Yes. The thing that really troubles me in this election is that it appears to me that all opposition politicians are seeming to try to forget that the country went through a pandemic. And during that pandemic, it cost the country hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds. The National Health Service, no one could go for the appointments and everything. The furlough scheme, it all cost lots and lots and lots of money. And I hear people like Keir Starmer saying, oh, the last 14 years of the Conservatives, as if nothing had happened. There was a pandemic. This country would have been in a much better position now had it not been for that.
You mentioned the pandemic. There are a lot of people, I've spoken to some, who use the pandemic and the way the Conservatives ran things, those lockdown parties, for example, as a reason of how they did not handle the pandemic as well.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand the feelings. 10 Downing Street is the head office of the country, and it's not the norm, really. And that isn't to say that you make rules and then you don't abide by them. I fully understand that. My main point is that this country is billions and billions and billions of pounds worse off than it would have been had it not been for the pandemic. And people like Keir Starmer and his colleagues are hoping that we'll all forget that and won't notice. They'll do everything the same as the Conservatives to the best of their ability. They'll do what they have to do and keep the left of the party quiet until they get elected. Then they'll all come out of the woodwork. And let's also not forget that less than 5 years ago, Keir Starmer was stating that Jeremy Corbyn would be a great Prime Minister. He's changed the name again. It was New Labour. Now it's changed Labour. What's it going to be next time?
You're clearly not a fan of the Labour Party, but if the polls are to be believed, the Conservatives aren't on course for another term. I mean, that is, of course, if the polls are to be believed, we won't know till Thursday. If that is the case, what have the Conservatives, your party that you've stayed loyal to, done wrong? What's gone wrong that you're way behind in the polls?
I think it's the message to the public. I don't think the public fully understand the implications of the pandemic. A lot of people say, oh, Rishi Sunak's a rich man and all that sort of thing. And
well, he is, isn't he?
Oh, yes, it certainly is, yes. But the thing with politics today, it's all presidential. And there's a lot of politics of envy and resentment. And I don't think we've got our message over largely on that basis.
Just before I let you both go, I want to ask you both, because I've had quite a lot of conversations here in the northeast of England, and one man's name has come up quite a lot, Nigel Farage. Just in 15 seconds, I want to get your sort of take for both of you on Mr Farage.
I think as a showman, he's a person who's very convincing with what he says, but it can't add up and you can't run a country on that basis.
And what about you?
I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. The man's a snake. He's an extreme right-wing Tory, and he'd never, ever, ever, ever get my vote, ever.
Why do you think then, both of you, that so many people, I say, of all the names that have come up in the conversations I've had, nearly 30 so far today, I know that's not scientific, but his name keeps coming up. And it's interesting because a lot of people I've spoken to up here, so if they don't like either of the main two parties, that's you, isn't it, Stuart? But you don't like Mr Farage.
Nigel Farage Sitting in a pub, drinking a pint of beer, talking to ordinary people doesn't make him a wonderful politician. The man's got no ideas. The party's got no ideas. If we win the election, then what? Where will we be then? Nah, I don't trust him.
He's clearly onto something though, isn't he, Bill? Because there's a lot of Conservative voters who are considering, like I say, some I've met this morning in another marginal seat, which is Darlington, ditching your party and going for Mr Farage, particularly on the issue of immigration. And they say, you know, he's got the answers. Mr Sunak hasn't managed to get anyone to Rwanda, for example. That's what someone said to me earlier. They believe Mr Farage might have the answers.
Well, he talks a good game, doesn't he? But how can it possibly work, the things that he says? He's such a showman, and I hope that in the next 48 hours people see through him and see sense. That's what I hope.
OK, well, thanks to both of you, to Bill and to Stuart. And of course, I think the conversation here, Matthew, just two people, but it is interesting. And I think the overriding thing from my time, not just here, but travelling to various parts of the country, is just how many people I've met who, just like Stuart, are undecided. And I think that is the key, is that there are still people making up their minds. It isn't necessarily a sense that, certainly I know that Bill is a big fan of the Conservatives, but there are a lot of people who are ditching their usual allegiances, and that's what makes this Thursday so interesting and indeed exciting. Well, the seat that I'm in is Newton Aycliffe and Spennymoor. We have a slate of all the candidates who are standing in this seat, which takes in Sedgefield, which is where I am. And of course, as you know, you can find all of the candidates standing in any constituency across the UK on the BBC News website. I'll be moving to another constituency the next time we speak, Matthew.
Regina, great stuff. Thanks very much. More from Regina in the coming couple of hours. Before we go to weather, I just want to take you back to Manchester Crown Court. The microphone's all set up because we are expecting to hear from the CPS, a full statement from them, and the police after that news of the last hour or so that the former nurse Lucy Letby has been found guilty of the attempted murder of a premature baby known as Baby K from February 2016. That was a retrial, the jury out for only a couple of hours before they returned with a unanimous verdict. So more from Manchester here on the programme in the next couple of minutes. Let's catch up first with weather details, and that's with Darren Beck. Darren.
Hello there. We've seen a lot of cloud heading our way again today. The winds are coming in from the Atlantic, somewhat stronger winds probably, I think, by Thursday. Those winds, though, will be bringing in some rain at times and keeping the temperatures quite low for this time of the year. Now, we have seen some sunshine. That was Eastbourne earlier on, and these are the average July maximum temperatures. This is what we should be getting, if you like, at this time of the year. But this is what we're going to find this afternoon. So those temperatures are something like 4 to 6 degrees lower than normal for this time of the year. So there's a cooler feel. All our weather's coming in from the Atlantic, and whilst we've seen a lot of cloud today, there's more cloud to come in from the Atlantic, which will bring some wetter weather as we head into the night. Still 1 or 2 showers around during the afternoon into the evening, but the wetter weather comes into Northern Ireland and Scotland, moves over the Irish Sea into northern parts of England. We may even get a bit of rain heading towards the southeast as well. So a lot of cloud around tonight. Before the rain arrives in eastern Scotland, temperatures here could just get a little bit lower. Most of the rain, I think, will be in the morning. That will then move away, but it stays quite grey and misty over the hills and coasts in Wales and the southwest. A little bit of rain comes back in, and then particularly in Scotland and Northern Ireland, it'll be followed by some sunshine and some showers, and then the winds start to pick up a bit as well. So these are the temperatures, and again, very disappointing for this time of the year. 15 to 19 degrees. Now that weather front will be out of the way and it takes the rain away, but you've got low pressure to the north of the UK. Quite a few isobars on the chart as well. Some stronger winds as we head into Thursday, particularly for northern areas. And this is where we'll see some frequent and heavy showers. And in Scotland, there's a risk of some thunderstorms as well. The further south you are, the better chance you have of staying dry. And there may well be more sunshine around, welcome sunshine, that will just lift those temperatures to perhaps as high as 20 degrees, but still not the 23 that we'd expect in the southeast of England. Some more weather fronts, though, do come in on Friday that could bring some rain to England and Wales, and further north we're looking at quite a number of showers particularly in Northern Ireland. Very unsettled through the rest of the week, and it stays quite showery probably into Saturday and Sunday, and still on the cool side.